Are you a good speller? Good at spelling things. Good speller? I am not a good speller. I mean, I have to tell you that I'm actually a terrible speller. I still have not, after 63 years, figured out the I before E, except after C, and sometimes when it comes with Y, unless it's on an odd-numbered Saturday kind of rule. The greatest invention that I have ever experienced since belt loops is the spell check on my phone and on my computer. I'm a terrible speller, but maybe you're a good speller. Maybe you think you're a good speller. Well, I want to put that to the test today. I want to ask you to spell, and you don't have to do this out loud. You just think if you know the spelling to this word. So are you ready? Yeah, I'm going to ask you to spell it, then I'm going to write the spelling here, hopefully correctly, on the board. So I want you in your mind to spell the word grace. Grace. And I'll spell it right here. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Grace. I know what you're thinking. You're right. You are a terrible speller. That's not even close. I mean, you got 3 of the same letters, but otherwise it's not. But I want you to think about it for a moment. You see, grace and respect share the same DNA. They're both gifts that we give. They can be demanded of us, expected of us, but they can only be given. Grace is only a gift. So is respect. Respect is only a gift. They share the same molecular structure. In fact, I believe that respect is simply grace in work clothes. Respect is street level grace. It's what grace looks like when we show it to someone who doesn't deserve it. And that's my prayer today. My prayer today is that we would have a fresh understanding of the power of the gift of respect. It was on July the 11th, 1804. The 2 men stood on a bluff above the Hudson River just west of New York City, just outside of the small town of Weehawken, New Jersey. One of the men that stood there at dawn on July 11th of 1804 was the Vice President of the United States. His name was Aaron Burr. He stood across what was called a field of honor from the former Treasury Secretary of the United States and a man who is considered a founding father of our nation named Alexander Hamilton. The 2 men had been rivals for over 2 decades, and they had exchanged criticisms and barbs with each other throughout their lives. But it was when Aaron Burr ran for the presidency of the United States in 1800 that he felt completely disrespected by Alexander Hamilton because, as the tradition would have it, the Electoral College was tied at the end of the election. And it came down to Alexander Hamilton making the decision to either elect Thomas Jefferson as president or Aaron Burr. And even though Alexander Hamilton was not a fan of Thomas Jefferson, he made it known that he liked Aaron Burr even less and cast his vote for Jefferson. 4 years later, after Aaron Burr was serving as the vice president, because that's how they did it in the early days of the United States, the person who ran for president and won became president, the one who finished second became vice president. There's an interesting concept, isn't it? But Aaron Burr, near the end of his term as vice president, ran for the governor of New York in 1804. A public statement was issued by Alexander Hamilton saying that he could not support a man like Aaron Burr for a significant public office and that he should not be trusted with the reins of power. This was too much for Aaron Burr, and he felt disrespected and demanded satisfaction. And so they arranged for a duel to take place on the bluffs above the Hudson River outside of Weehawken, New Jersey at dawn on July the 11th, 1804. Just coincidentally, it was just adjacent to the property where Alexander Hamilton's oldest son had been killed in a duel 3 years before. The day before the duel, Alexander Hamilton wrote a letter to his wife and his family. In the letter, he explained why it was a matter of honor for him to engage in this duel, not just because of the honor of the memory of his son, but because he could not, in good conscience, recant the things that he had said about Mr. Aaron Burr. But near the end of his letter, he said that it was his intention to go through with the duel, but what he would do is he would throw away his shot. No one knows who shot first on that July 11th morning. All that the witnesses could recall was that Hamilton's shot hit a tree branch above Burr's head. Burr's shot found its mark, hitting Alexander Hamilton in the right abdomen just above his hip, tumbling through his body, tearing up his kidneys and his liver, and lodging itself in his spine, paralyzing him. He died 31 hours later. It is a tragic tale of the power of disrespect. That when Aaron Burr felt disrespected and demanded satisfaction, that it pushed these two men to a mortal conflict. 200 years later, almost to the year, a young New York playwright named Lin-Manuel Miranda, who had just brought his first work to Broadway, a very successful musical called In the Heights, which he wrote, produced, and starred in. He picked up a copy of Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, and as he began to read through it, he realized that the story of Hamilton and Burr was positively Shakespearean. And he thought it would make an amazing Broadway musical. He would spend the next 6 years composing the songs that would make up the musical Hamilton. It was in May of 2009 that Lin-Manuel Miranda was invited by President Obama to the White House for an evening of what they called music, poetry, and spoken word. They had expected him to come and perform a song from his Broadway hit, In the Heights, but instead, he debuted for the audience of the President of the United States and his family and gathered dignitaries a thing that he was working on called his Hamilton Mixtapes. And they performed publicly for the first time the song that would be the opening number of the Broadway musical Hamilton. It was in February of 2015 that the play Hamilton opened off-Broadway at the Public Theater in New York City. For a 4-month run, it sold out every single performance. In July of 2015, it premiered in the Richard Rodgers Theater in Broadway and opened to the public in August of 2015, selling out 8 performances a week for almost 5 years until March of 2020, when all of the theaters on Broadway were closed. The idea that you could take the story of the disrespect between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton and turn it into a Broadway musical is an outrageous thought just on the face of it. Much less what Lin-Manuel Miranda had in mind. You see, he had in mind that the cast of his play Hamilton would be a colorblind cast. that the lead actors portraying these historical figures would be cast regardless of their race, regardless of the color of their skin. He also decided that it would not be a conventional Broadway musical. It would be a montage, a mosaic of a variety of musical genres, including rap and hip hop and soul and R&B, as well as Broadway classic songs. Even Broadway satire, which is perhaps the most popular song in the musical Hamilton, that is sung by the King of England, called "You'll Be Back." The idea that you would create a successful Broadway musical in these genres with this kind of a cast on this subject is an idea that even if you don't like musical theater, even if you have no affection for Broadway, you have to respect the creative genius of it, the risk of it, the outrageous idea that you could actually pull this off. And then when you see the success of it, when you watch it, as my family did on Disney Plus on July the 3rd, you're amazed. And you respect the display of the genius and the talent of Lin-Manuel Miranda and that team that produced that play. This is what I call the first of two kinds of respect. The first kind of respect is what I call a natural respect. Natural respect is easy for us. Natural respect is built on two fundamental ideas. The first idea is that respect is earned. Natural respect is easy because we give it to people who do amazing things. It is easy for us to admire, to honor, to respect someone who accomplishes something amazing, who wins a championship, who climbs an unclimbable mountain, who overcomes immeasurable obstacles, who shows sacrifice and determination and character. We grant them with our respect. We give them the respect because of what they accomplished, because of what they represent. And for most of us, for virtually all of us, this kind of respect is a respect that we enjoy. It's easy. We hang medals around their necks and we hand them trophies and we build statues in their honor because this is important for us. Because the people who we naturally respect are a reflection of the people we want to be. The people we are inspired by tells us a whole lot about the people that we wish we were. They also inspire us because they remind us of what we're capable of the best in us. Those heroes, those people that we give respect to because of their accomplishments, because of their sacrifices. These are the people who have earned our respect, and they inspire us and challenge us and remind us of the best in all of us. But there's another element of natural respect, and that is a respect that is learned. It is a learned respect. And to some degree, this is taught to us. It is taught to us by our parents. It is taught to us in our home. It is taught to us by our teachers and in our schools. It's taught to us by our culture, by our community, by our society. We learn about certain things and certain places and certain people and certain positions, certain circumstances that are worthy of honor. They're special places. They're special things. And we learn as children to give these things respect. Now, some of those things are taught to us. Others of those things we learn by experience. We learn to respect how sharp the knife is, or how hot that plate is, or how mean that dog is, or how cold that water is in February. We learn to respect these things because we experience them, because we are taught them, and we assign, and we are taught to assign to sometimes inanimate objects, places, a sense of respect. If you go to Auschwitz or you go to the Holocaust Memorial, it demands, it presents us with the responsibility to show respect. There are certain places like Arlington Seminary that are cemetery, or churches or cathedrals. There are certain experiences that we admire, that we honor, and they are due a measure of our admiration and respect. And we learn about these things over the course of our life. We are taught that there are certain people in positions of power, people in positions of authority, who we should learn to respect. When you go into a courtroom, it's no time to throw shade on the judge. It is time to respect the judge and to address the judge as your honor. We assign certain honors to people in our culture. We give them titles. We give them attachments to their name. When I was ordained in 1986, in spite of the better judgment of most people, I was given the title of Reverend. And by virtue of my spiritual pursuits, I was given a measure of respect. Now, I have to admit that I'm old school when it comes to what I was taught about respect. I was taught that you respected your teachers, and you respected your officers, and you respected those people in authority over you, that you respected your grandparents, and you respected a stranger's home. When you were a guest in someone's home, you didn't just roam around and comb through their refrigerator. You showed a measure of respect. It was polite. It was etiquette. And I believe that's beneficial to all of us. It is in our best interest. I believe it is in the best interest of a healthy community to weave into the fabric of our relationships a measure of respect. It will go well for you. Trust me. If when you see the police officer's lights in your rearview mirror because you're speeding down 360 in your wife's car, not your own car because your car won't speed, but you're driving your wife's car, and the officer comes to your window, it's best if you show the officer a measure of respect. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, officer. Here's my license. Here's my insurance. Here's my registration. What can I do for you? Can you perhaps clue me in as to why you pulled me over? That measure of respect will work in your favor. You know, it never occurred to me when I was sitting in an airplane in the middle seat in coach, and I was sitting there and I was going, hey, wait a minute. There's 2 seats in the front of this plane, and those 2 people get those seats all to themselves. And they have the best view on the entire plane. They get to see everything. They get all these gauges to look at. They get to talk on the radio. I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to walk into that cockpit, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to sit there. You go back and sit in the middle seat in coach. I want this view. I'm on this plane. It never occurred to me because I respect the people who are in charge of the aircraft. And believe me, you want to respect the pilot, the captain of the airplane. In fact, you want that person to be the best pilot on the face of the earth when you're on that plane with your family. Never occurred to me to go up there and disrespect them. Now, I know this isn't fashionable. This is not a popular opinion in our day, and I know why. I know why. It's for one reason. Because there are times when the officer comes up to your car is going rogue, and that officer has reasons only known to them to mistreat you or to abuse their authority. And I have been in those situations where I have sat with the widow of a man whose life was ended because on that day, the doctor or the surgeon wasn't worthy of their respect. They made a mistake. What do you tell the families of the people who lost their family and friends because on that day, in that moment, that wasn't the best pilot on earth? What do you tell a person who grew up with a parent who should have respected them and didn't, and abused them? See, I was raised with this sense of you respect people in power, you respect your elders. I have a picture, a 5x7 picture of a 19-year-old sailor. That 19-year-old sailor is named Jim Haney. It was taken on a beach in the Philippines just before the end of World War II. That Jim Haney is a man who I will always call Dad, or my father. And he told me the story of this picture, and the picture portrays him on the beach, and he told me that the sailor who was on his ship who took that picture was killed the next day by a sniper's bullet. And as I've reflected over the years on that story about that photograph, I realized that if the roles were reversed, and a young 19-year-old Jim Haney had taken the picture, and he had been the one who was killed by a sniper the next day, that I literally would not even exist. So he will always be Dad. He will never be Jim. But what happens when the people who hold those positions of power over us are not worthy of our respect? How do we think about these people? How do we think about the gift of respect when the person who is due that respect is not worthy of that respect? How do we think about that when we don't know what to think? This was a conversation we began last week, and I invited you to think with me about how we think. Not what we think, but how do we think? How do we think when we don't know what to think? How do we think about things like respect, the gift that we have the power to give? How do we think about it? And the guide for thinking about thinking is a single sentence that we're looking at. A single sentence from the Bible, from the book of Philippians, chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 begins by saying, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is respectable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is worthy of outstanding recognition, think about such things." Whatever is respectable. The word there that the Apostle Paul uses is the word semnos. Now, the word semnos in the Greek language is not the primary word for respect. The primary word that is translated respect in the New Testament, in the Greek language, is the word timna, or timnos. The word semnos is kind of like the secret sauce of respect. The word semnos means to be dignified, or to be substantial, or to be significant. When something was semnos, it was the thing at the core of the thing you respected. You gave honor to something or to someone because they had semnos, because they had significance, because they had dignity. It's what the Apostle Paul describes to his two young proteges, Timothy and Titus. In his first letter to Timothy, he's talking about the qualifications for spiritual leadership. And he says if a spiritual leader is a father, he should manage his own family well. And he must do so in a manner that is semnos, that is dignified, that is substantial. He tells Titus in another letter that when he's looking for spiritual leaders, he should look for older men who have a reputation of self-control, and they are worthy of dignified respect. They are worthy of semnos. Semnos is the secret sauce, the thing behind respect, the thing that when we think, should I grant respect to this person, what I'm looking for, what I'm searching for, because this is what it means to think. It means to seek out, to search, to interrogate, to investigate, to examine carefully and thoroughly, to consider and to meditate on, to find the thing about that person or about that place that allows us to grant them respect. And this is what I call the second part, the second attribute of respect, and that's a supernatural respect. Supernatural respect basically is rooted in the idea of our own self-respect. I think that at the root of supernatural respect is the respect we have for ourselves. Now, I realize that I'm probably not on solid footing psychologically, but I believe that it is impossible for us to respect someone else if we don't respect ourselves. And when I see a culture of disrespect, I am suspicious that the origins of that disrespect are built in the lack of respect a person has for themselves. Now, I think I'm on pretty good biblical footing when I talk about this because the instruction about loving your neighbor, Jesus was often asked, what was the greatest commandment? And every time he gave the same answer. He quoted from Leviticus, he quoted from the law, and he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor, and how does he say it every time? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. The golden rule is an example of how Jesus is saying that respect for others begins with self-respect. It begins with this idea that you are worthy of respect. He says, basically, do unto others as you would have them do to you. Grant others the respect that you would want in return, that you feel you are worthy of. But this is not a narcissistic paradigm. This is not a paradigm that says that I can respect you because I'm so awesome. Of course I can respect you because I'm so much better than you. No, that's not what self-respect is. Self-respect is an intimate honesty about who we really are. Both our strengths and our weaknesses, our damage and our capacities, our abilities and our flaws. Because this is how God sees us. Because this is the nature of the respect that God has for us. God sees us as we are and says, yet you're worth it. You are worthy of my affection. You are worthy of my admiration. I made you to be worth it. In fact, I believe that you are worth creating and you are worth admiring and you are worth dying for. It is the essence of the gospel message. It is the essence of the message of grace. Because if God is able to look at us and see us in all of our faults and all of our flaws and say, I admire you, I honor you, I respect you, you are worth it. You are worth my love and admiration and affection. God also believes that and looks at others exactly the same way. Which means so should we. Which is exactly why respect is the essence of what grace looks like. The grace that we have for ourselves is the grace that God gives us, and the grace that we have the gift and the opportunity to give to others. You seek out the semnos. You seek out the value. You seek out the dignity of the guy who's passed down in his own vomit on 6th Street. You don't see the tragedy that's there. You see the dignity that may be covered over in the trauma of life. You think about those things. You seek out, even in the person who you believe is not worth your respect, you grant them the dignity of grace. I realize that this is a complicated idea, but respect is something that we cannot be forced to give. It's just like grace. It can be expected, it can be demanded, but the power is ours. It is entirely within our power to either grant or withhold respect. It is up to us to seek out what makes a person worthy of our respect. And I believe that in the image of God and because of the grace of God, it's there. You may have to dig really deep to find it in some people. But this is the essence of respect. It's the DNA of it. Some things are easy to respect. It's easy for me to respect Lin-Manuel Miranda as a playwright, as a creative genius. It's easy for me to respect. I mean, it's easy for a lot of people to respect because the play that he wrote and starred in and produced, Hamilton, is a runaway success. Before the play Hamilton opened on Broadway, it broke the record for pre-sales of tickets. They sold in advance, before the play even opened, $30 million in advance ticket sales. For a while, it held the Broadway record for the highest box office revenue for 1 week's performances. For 8 performances in 1 week of November of 2016, Hamilton grossed $3.3 million in ticket sales. In 2016, the play was honored with 16 Tony nominations. It won 11 of them. It won the Pulitzer Prize for drama in 2016. And the Disney Corporation, this past January, gave Hamilton $75 million worth of respect by paying $75 million so that they could stream it on Disney Plus, which many of you will go home and watch as soon as we're done. When my family and I watched it on July 3rd, it was obvious. It was easy to respect the talent that created this story. A tragic story of the consequences of the power of disrespect. Alexander Hamilton, who is the lead in the play, is still well respected in our culture. In fact, there are dozens of cities and towns and counties in America that bear his name, that bear the name Hamilton. For 2 years, I went to Hamilton Elementary School. We respect Alexander Hamilton as one of the founding fathers, as the architect of the United States Treasury. In fact, we have so much respect for Alexander Hamilton that we put his face on our money. His face is on a $10 bill, and if you want to show me some respect, bring me a container full of pictures of Alexander Hamilton, and I will respect you for it. Aaron Burr, not so much. It's harder to respect Aaron Burr, because on the morning of July the 11th, 1804, when Alexander Hamilton wasted his shot, Aaron Burr did not. He mortally wounded Alexander Hamilton, killing him. It was a field of honor, but he was charged with murder. See, dueling was outlawed. It was illegal. That same year, he was acquitted of murder charges, but he left New York City in disgrace. His public career was virtually over. He wound up getting mixed up in a grand scheme in the Louisiana Territory, where he was involved with some activities that were considered by the federal government to be treasonous. And in 1807, he was actually charged with treason and stood trial for treason against the United States of America in front of the Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, the federal prosecutor who argued for the prosecution of Aaron Burr was none other than a young attorney named Alexander Hamilton, Jr. The case was decided by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court because it was divided among the other justices. He decided to acquit Aaron Burr, which made the President of the United States so angry that he threatened to dissolve the Supreme Court itself. Aaron Burr spent 4 years in self-imposed exile in England because he couldn't function in the United States. He returned after 4 years and opened a law practice in New York City under his mother's maiden name, Edwards. He lived in New York practicing law under the name Aaron Edwards for almost a decade until he married a very wealthy New York widow. He was 77 years old. She was 57. She stayed with him for 4 months until she realized that he had siphoned off virtually all of her wealth and invested it in a scheme that lost her entire fortune. Shortly after she left him, he suffered a debilitating stroke, and he spent the last 2 years of his life living in a single-room apartment in a boarding house called the St. James Hotel in Port Richmond, Staten Island, New York. He died in 1936 alone, financially destitute, and a completely broken man. But you have to respect the life he lived. You can find the worth if you are willing to think about it. It's up to us, you see. It's up to us. We have the power to withhold or to grant respect, to place disrespect on someone, or to grant them the gift of respect. It is the power of grace. It's what grace looks like at street level. It's grace dressed up in work clothes. This is the nature of respect. This is what we are to think about, to search for, to find the ability to give the gift, the powerful gift of respect. So I ask you today, are you a good speller?